in the prayer that your Son taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Well, amen. My name is Shane Russo. For those of you who don't, am I on? Can you hear me? I can't. Check. It's on. Is it on now? Is it on now? No? All right, well. She stole my coffee. She stole my coffee. All right, well. Now I have to not look at my notes more. So, this is actually going to be a great illustration for what I'm about to talk about today. After Alyssa tried to steal my coffee. First, though, my name is Shane Russo. I'm still the Connections Coordinator here at Girard. First, for a few more weeks. Everybody who participated yesterday in the golf outing, I want to say thank you for all of that. Remember, all those proceeds go to our MAD camp. I was unfortunately not able to be a part of it, which is one thing I look forward to every year, but I had something, we had a conference Vicki and I had to go to, and it was miserable. So you guys had more fun than we did. We spent 4 hours texting each other. So, so there's that. There's also, we're going to play the video here in a second, which you've seen before. It's the MAD Camp announcement, but MAD Camp is important. It's important. We have a lot of volunteers. We could use a few more, so if you haven't been approached, raise your hand. No, I'm just kidding. If you haven't been approached, you probably will be soon. So we're going to show that video because it's really important, and also because when Andrew and I edited this week's video, we forgot to upload it to YouTube, which we found out this morning. So we're going to go ahead and just show this one, and then I'll come back and we'll start talking about adventure.
This is your Connect card. Everyone should be sure to fill one out to let us know you are here. If you're a first-time guest, mark that on the card because the church gives $5 to the Emmanuel Community Care Center for every first-time guest that we know about. So let us know you are here.
The Commotion kids are adorable. They inject vibrancy and life into this church. The teachers and volunteers of Commotion are irreplaceable. The program itself ensures that our children and grandchildren are going one step closer to each other and to God. But Commotion doesn't exist without your offering. The harsh fact is that kids cost money, but they are so worth it. When you give to this church, you're giving to ministries like Commotion. You help ensure that it will continue and grow.
You can text to give or give online by going to ifiregirard.com and clicking on Give, or drop your offering with your Connect card in the metal kiosk on the way out today. Don't forget to follow iFireGirard on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay connected throughout the week, and on YouTube to see all our videos, including this one.
Awesome. It is so hard to find good help these days. I tell you, Andrew, we'll blame it on me, because it really was my fault. But Commotion's important too. So we are starting a new series called The Adventure, and if this last 5 minutes does not sum that up well, I don't know what does. Basically, if you weren't aware, at the 9:30 service, we had a baptism. We baptized Olivia Sheasley, which was awesome. That was so cute. And then we also celebrated our preschool, our Great Beginnings preschool. Marilyn Watson is retiring, and at the end of the year, we the preschool is closing, so we were celebrating 30 plus years of the preschool, and it was just amazing. We had people line up, like they went all the way from over there to over here, just of the people who just showed up, whether they had gone here or they were parents of people who had gone here. It was really quite amazing. And I said to them that this series, The Adventure, it's really a nice way to springboard off of celebrating a new beginning, a new entrance into this faith with Olivia, and also to celebrate something great coming to an end. And we have all of that encapsulated in this idea of adventure, because when we adventure, we are coming to grips with something not being the same, but also looking ahead to something brand new. A lot of us here, I just finished seminary. I think most of you know that. Some of us have gone to college, some of us finished, some of us went to high school. One thing that we all have in common is the fact that when we finished that journey, the world looked completely different than when we started. I think Veronica here could probably attest to, even your first year, the way the world looks to you now looks nothing like it did at the beginning of the year. Would you agree? Yeah. The world changes. Stuff looks different when we start, or when we finish to when we start. This might be a little surprising or disheartening to you, but some of us who have finished college, we probably know this story to be true. You spend 4 or 5 years in college, and then you graduate into a field that has no jobs, right? And when you started college, it was like Veronica's like, what are you doing? Stay in school. It's cool. Just stay in school. You'll be fine. No, but seriously, you enter into college, and then you go through, and then by the time you're done, the landscape of the world has changed. You were preparing for something, an eventuality that didn't exist. How about a less dire-sounding example? And I forgot. I'm so upset, because Vicki and I were talking about this week, because last week, when she slayed the golden calf of Disney up here on the altar, we were talking about it all week, because some people approached her actually like, I go to Disney, and it was hilarious for us all week long. Well, for me, I don't know. I wasn't the butt of it, but we were talking about this idea of Disney and, upsetting some people. So I have this Disney doll, this Mickey doll, that makes a lot of noise. I was going to sit it up here. We were going to put a little offering plate. It was going to be great. But let's just take that idea of Disney, and let's use that as an example. You have the perfect trip to Disney planned out. You've got your tickets, you've got your hotel, your transportation, all of that set. You have your itinerary down. You know exactly how long it's going to take you to get from Pirates of the Caribbean, right? I'm looking right at Jody right now. You know how long it's going to take you to get from Pirates of the Caribbean to that hell known as It's a Small World, right? And if you've ever stood in line for 90 minutes for It's a Small World, you want to murder the person who wrote that song at the end. But you've got all that going. You've got your flip-flops, you've got your tank tops, you've got your bags, your snacks. You're ready. You are prepared for this trip. It's going to be awesome. And then you get there, and you wake up that first morning ready to go, and it's 60 degrees, it's pouring down rain, and your son's puking all over the place. All of a sudden, the road in front of you looks nothing like the road behind you. You were not prepared for this. All your preparations did not prepare you for that. Nothing looks the same. That's true of the church, too. This church and all churches. We used to be a church that operated in a culture that gave preference to the things of Christianity. If you didn't go to church on Sunday morning, you heard about it probably from your boss on Monday, and that was normal. Okay, that was the world we lived in. They had blue laws. You know what blue law was? When everything would close down on Sunday for church. For church and for the Sabbath. It was built into our culture. Historians have a word for this time. It was like a 1,500 year, 1,700 year period, really. It's called Christendom. That was the world. The Western culture was built up around preference to Christianity. And we do not live in that world anymore. But all of our structures are still built upon that. Even our United Methodist structure is built on this idea that they're a preference to the things of Christianity. We even do church that way. We have this attractional model of church where we feel if we just broadcast it enough, or we market it enough, or we have a good enough band, or we have all that, the people will come to us. It's an attractional model built on the assumption that people want to go to church, that church is like Christianity is a thing. But we don't live in that world anymore. We just do not. Now, we can be upset by that. We can lament that. That's okay. We can pine for the times that things go back to the way they were. Or, might I suggest we try something else? Let's do something different, do something new. If we want to salvage our vacations, salvage our educations, our religion, our spirituality, our faith, our church, anything, our lives, if we want to salvage any of that, we're going to have to do something completely different because the world doesn't look like it used to. Now, it doesn't mean not having goals. We have the same goal. If you're on the vacation, you still want to have a good vacation, but you now have to give up everything you thought was going to happen in terms of how it was going to happen. You still have the same goal to have a great vacation, but you need to change absolutely everything about how you're going to make that happen. We call that adventure. I call it adventure. You need to go on an adventure. We, as a church and as people, need to go on an adventure. Now, adventures can be fun. They can be scary, but adventures are usually worthwhile. Usually at the end of them, you can look back and say, wow, that was worth it. Even if it's a loss, honestly, even if you go on the adventure and it doesn't turn out anything like you thought and the goal completely fails, you've still learned something. It's still worthwhile. Now, we don't like going on adventures. We're not used to going on adventures in our culture anymore. I use this example at 9:30. Angela and I like to get into the car and drive, okay? We like to get into the car and just drive. We don't even, she's like, where are we going? I don't know. We're going for a drive. And we'll end up 2 hours away on some dirt road somewhere. I didn't even know those things really existed. I thought they were in country songs. But you end up on a dirt road, and then you're like, well, how do I get home? Well, we live in a world of GPS. It's not really an adventure. We live in a world where I can put in my address, and it'll bring me back home. That's safety net. That's not an adventure. That's a drive. That's fine. But we live in a world where if we put in the address where we wanted to go right now, it would just say recalculating, nonstop. It would just say recalculating all over because there's no map for where we are right now. We're in completely uncharted territory. Okay, so we're not used to going on adventures, but adventure we must. Adventure we must because everything is different. If we're going to adventure, though, we have 3 things that kind of are wrapped up in this idea of adventure. We need to let go of our expectations. I kind of already touched on that one a little bit. We need to let go of our expectations. We need to keep learning as we go. And we need to keep on going no matter what. The scripture for this whole series of adventure comes from Isaiah 43:19. I'm going to read that now. I'm not going to keep coming back to it, but hear this and know that it's the foundation for everything we're going to say for the next few weeks. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Honestly, we could have just used that very first part. See, I am doing a new thing. It's one of those things that I hear when I imagine God saying, I am doing a new thing, I get amped. Even though it might be completely contrary to what I was just thinking about doing. The idea, we don't like it when other people tell us they're doing something new. But the idea for me that God says he's going to do something new, that kind of excites me. So keep that in mind as we talk about these next few weeks about what we're going to do. The kind of the arc of this series talks about adventure. Today we're going to talk about the 3 things, those 3 things I already mentioned. We're going to talk about how some people, we're going to frame this in a historical context. Lewis and Clark, do any of you know Lewis and Clark? Okay, the high school kids are like, yeah, we learned about that. For those of you who don't remember, which I did not when I first started reading that book, but Lewis and Clark, Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, were commissioned by Thomas Jefferson in 1803. They were commissioned to lead the Corps of Discovery to find the Northwest Passage. Now, the Northwest Passage was basically a water route that would connect the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. So they were commissioned to do that, and they were explorers, and they went on that. So as we talk through this series, we're going to frame some of what we say in light of their story, because it parallels very well. We're going to talk about how they got some help in an unlikely place, some of the pitfalls they faced, and honestly what that means for any of us, because what do we care about something that happened back in 1803, right? But it does have a correlation. First off, we need to let go of expectations. We need to let go of our expectations. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have plans or we don't have ideas of what could happen, but we let go of the expectation of what should happen, what needs to happen. See, because what ends up happening is it doesn't go the way we think it should, and then we have a visceral negative reaction. We either get scared, we get angry, we lash out, or we tighten our grip. We tighten our grip on our expectation. And I've used this analogy before, this imagery before, but it still holds true. If I hold on to something so tight, if I hold on to a firecracker in my closed fist, when it blows up, it's going to blow up my hand, and it's all gone. But if I hold a firecracker in my open palm, it still might hurt a little bit, but I'm probably going to have my hand left when it's over. Okay, so you just have to hold a little looser to your expectations. Give up what you think should happen. Now, Meriwether-Lewis, Meriwether-Lewis and William Clark. Lewis and Clark had an expectation about what they thought was going to happen when they went on this trip. Okay, they were rivermen. When I say rivermen, they took canoes and they rowed up the Missouri River to its source. And the way the world worked back then, well, the understanding of the world for like 300 years of exploration said one thing. It led them to this assumption that the world on the other side of the continental divide would be the same as it was on their side. So they understood things to be the same. So they prepared only for that reality. So they only brought canoes, and they were ready to canoe, basically get to the source, walk over to the Columbia River, ride that down, just nice and slow, nice gentle slope, down to the Pacific Ocean. Do you remember what they found instead, Veronica? Do you remember? They found the Rocky Mountains. Which probably has some rapids in the rivers. They didn't find a gentle slope that they could just kind of float down to the Pacific Ocean. They found the Rocky Mountains. Question, how do you canoe over mountains? That's right, you don't. So, all of a sudden, what should be was not. For Lewis and Clark, what should be was not. And they had a choice in that moment. They could complain about it, or they could change, they could let go of their expectation. Now, they could have quit then and gone back, but they didn't do that. They were good little explorers, and so they did what all good explorers do, and they just kept on going, which we'll get to. But in order to do that, they had to let go of their expectations about what they thought should happen. The road ahead of them was nothing like the road behind. The only thing that they knew in that moment was that they had to change. They had to change. They traded in their horses, they traded in their canoes for horses. They learned a few things, and that brings me to the next point. They had to actually learn a whole new skill set on the fly. They had to learn as they went. They went from being rivermen, people who only knew how to ride canoes. I don't know, what do you, paddle? Drive? You don't drive a canoe. Row? Yeah, let's do that. We'll say row. They only knew how to do that, and now they have to figure out how to get over the mountain. So they traded in their canoes for horses, but they were not horse riders. Horsemen? They didn't do that. I mean, they probably knew how to ride horses, but they were not prepared to go over the Rocky Mountains on horses. So they had to learn something completely new. If they hadn't done that, they would not have continued. They wouldn't have been able to. Because they knew then that if you stop growing, the day you stop learning is the day you stop growing. and the day you stop growing, you just accept misery. Now, misery is going to happen. It's going to be a part of your life. But if you accept that that's the only thing that happens, that's a problem. So the ability to learn as you go sort of negates that a little bit. It allows you to deal with misery and learn from it and move on. If you don't learn from life's lessons, you're going to bear the weight of that. We all have lessons that life kind of throws at us, whether we want them to come or not. If you choose not to learn from those, you will carry that with you forever. Conversely, if you choose to learn from those as they come, you get to carry that with you too. And that'll never go away. The stuff you learn from life's lessons never goes away. I know this to be true. Amazing things can happen when you learn from life, especially the tough things that life brings. I know this to be true. When I was a kid, when my dad died, I had to learn how to live with my mom again. My mom and my dad were separated when I was 8, and he lived with his girlfriend and their kids. And my mom couldn't take care of me. Like, she couldn't handle me. I was rough for my mom. Shocker. Nobody, everybody's like, no, you were the best kid ever. Yeah, that's not true. I was like one of the worst kids ever, and my mom was just like, nope, I'll just send you to your dad, which I actually enjoyed, except for my dad ruled with an iron fist, so he didn't just say no. He brought stuff with him when he said no. Usually fists or belt buckles or things like that, but that was what I was in, and then he died. And I had to learn to live with my mom, who had no idea how to handle me. It wasn't really her fault, but she didn't, and I had to learn. We both had to learn how to live in the new reality, because suddenly it was all different. You know, it was just, nothing was the same. When my mom remarried 2 years later to my stepdad, Sean, who I've talked about before, who I have great admiration for now, I love that man. But when my mom married him, I didn't. I don't think I ever treated a human being worse than I treated him, honestly, when my mom married him. I had to learn, over time, how to love him and how to see him as my dad. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest about it, he was so much better than my biological dad because he did something my biological dad never did. And that was he made a huge, huge sacrifice and life change for somebody else's benefit. He became sober 14 years ago because my nephew, his grandson, who they had custody of, was in their care, and he knew that if he didn't change, then Tyler would have nowhere to go. You know, so I had to learn, that just because it's different doesn't make it bad. I had to learn that. When I quit music school, I had to figure out who I was, because I'd gone to music school based on other people's expectations. Other people wanted me to be a musician. I didn't have the drive to be a musician. I didn't have the drive to practice every day like you needed to, and to go through all the BS that comes along with trying to be a non-starving artist. So I quit music school, and I had to learn what that meant. I had to learn who that meant I was. Finally figured that out. When I figured that out and got my teaching degree, I then had to learn how to listen to God and have God tell me who I was, when that degree became absolutely meaningless. I couldn't use it anymore. So I had to learn, I had to listen, I had to learn to listen. And when I had to switch churches in the middle of seminary because my home church would not let me do my field study there, direct quote, I don't want to put out the fires that your mouth starts. Again, can't blame them. I can't blame them, but I had to figure out who I was meant to be. I had to figure out who I was meant to be, not who other people thought I should be. Okay? I had to learn that. And finally, I decided recently, when I decided very adamantly that I was not going to take an appointment to a church for at least another year, I had to learn to listen to God all over again and hear him say, "You're going to go where I put you." And here we are. Look at the fruit of all of that learning. The fruit of all of that learning is I get to stand here now and help you experience what I did in the hope that it takes you one step closer to God. If I had not listened at any point along the way, it would have led to inner conflict, struggle, probably depression. Honestly, if I had just not listened and learned, I would have just accepted misery. Lewis and Clark had to learn as well. They had to learn how to navigate uncharted territory, basically. One of the things they did in that learning was they just kept on going. That brings me to the final point of this, is you just got to keep on going. Lewis and Clark could have stood around complaining that they were given bad information. Like, could you, it honestly to me would make for a great little YouTube short, with Lewis and Clark standing in front of Jefferson, just complaining like little teenagers, like, "It's not my fault, he gave me a bad map." Like, we do that all the time. We do that kind of thing all the time, where again, it goes back to the expectations thing. They could have just stood around complaining that they had bad information. I could have continued to look at the road ahead of me and blamed other people for all of my failures, all of my struggles. In the 2-year period that I had 15 jobs, and when I just saw eyebrows raised, it's hard to get 15 jobs in 2 years. It's even harder to not get fired from any of them. Okay, I quit them all because I had this idea that server kept doing her job wrong, so it made my job harder, so I'm just not going to do that anymore. People need to stop ordering extra pepperoni on their pizza. It just makes my job harder. I created the training program for this system. Why am I not a manager? Kind of stuff. I don't get what I deserve. It's basically everyone else's fault. And every single time I stopped, I turned around, and I just quit. I stopped, I turned around, and just quit. I could have done that. Lewis and Clark could have done that, but we didn't. Well, let me rephrase that. I did for 2 years, and then I didn't. An opportunity came along, and there were just as many struggles in that one, but I had changed at that point. I had flipped a switch in my mind that said, this isn't all about me anymore. And I just kept going because there was a goal in mind in it, and I had to. And I recognized that it just wasn't going to be the way I thought, but I had to keep going. The reason why we were able to do those things is because we chose to keep going. We just kept going. Good Lord, we kept going. All of those things happened because we started with the choice to keep on going. Now, adventure starts with imagination. Adventure starts with imagination. I would love to sit here and say that the 3 things I want you to do this week are to let go of all your expectations, learn as you go, and keep on going no matter what. Yes, I want you to do those things. I didn't just spend 20 minutes up here saying it because I didn't want you to do them. But those things are learnable. I want you to hear them today. I want you to learn them tomorrow and the next day. We'll learn them as we go. But what I want you to do today, and this one's hard, yet it's a yes or no. It's a yes or no, and it shouldn't take much thought. And that is, I want everyone in this room, whether it's for the church, for yourselves, for your family, for your jobs, whatever, any place this applies to, I want you to commit to the adventure. It's super simple. You just say yes or no. I'm willing to do this. Imagine what life would look like if you let go of your expectations, if you committed to the adventure. Okay, imagine what your life would look like. If you let go of all your expectations. Again, that doesn't mean not planning. Of course you plan. But when your plan blows up, you just make a new plan. It's frustrating. If you have kids in here, you know what this is like already. If you have kids in here, you know what this is like already. Because you plan for something, and then your kid loses his shoe 3 minutes before you got to leave. What do? Well, you expected it to be a different way, and now it's not. So what do? Well, you get rid of that expectation and say, well, now I live in this new reality, so we've got one shoe, and we got to figure out what to do. So then you learn. You learn, A, keep the shoes in the same spot every time. B, be very specific to your child about how to put them away. You learn. You just learn as you go. And then, even if you don't find the shoe, you don't just not go. You go. With one shoe and all. I've taken the kids out of the house with no shoes because they lost them. People are all like, why don't your kids have shoes? I'm like, because they're insane. They're crazy people. I'm a warden of crazy people. But that's the reality I'm in. Honestly, I could go back to before Carmen was born. Before Carmen was born, Angela and I tried for 7 years to have Carmen. We prepared in every way you could possibly prepare, emotionally and mentally, for that reality. Then we got to a point where we were just like, well, I guess it's not going to happen. So then we prepared for that reality. I remember saying to her, I am completely happy with our life, even if we never have kids. You're enough for me. And then like 2 weeks later, she got pregnant. So you want to talk about changing realities. We expected things, it didn't happen. Then we expected another thing, it didn't happen, and then now she's pregnant. And by the way, I've said this before too, Angela's the most miserable pregnant person on the planet, right? So if we ever have 4, I'm gonna need help. But the reality is this, is that, oh man, it just went away. I had this crusher I was gonna end with, and now it just went away. Do you know why? Because God is all like, stop talking about your wife like that. I guess the point was, what would things look like if you gave up your expectations? If I hadn't given up the expectation to have a child and become content with the reality that I was in and to plan for that, we probably would have gotten divorced. If you think about it, if all I wanted, if that was the driving force for me, that I could not possibly be happy unless that expectation was fulfilled, it would have eaten at me, it would have gnawed at me, it would have made me resent her as a person. And you can't live in a marriage like that. So I had to give that up. Think about something in your life that you could let go of, or at least loosen up your grip on. And what would that do for you? Having kids makes you learn as you go. I've already said the shoe thing, but honestly, if you want to know what it's like to have to learn something new every single day, just watch a kid for a week. And they will teach you what it's like to learn something new every day. Today is a good example. I learned today that Carmen likes to throw things at people who tell him no. Now, I've never once thrown anything at anybody for them telling me no, but I now get to learn that my child's got a little violent streak in him, and how do I deal with that? I could sit here and be all like, well, that's not how we behave, and that isn't how we behave. I expect you to do this. I do expect that. However, the reality is have you ever said this to a child? We don't do that. How many parents have ever said, oh, we don't throw things at people? Well, apparently some of us do. So now we live in that reality that some of us do throw things, and so what do we do with that? We learn how to not throw things, or how to have better expressions of our anger, or whatever. As a dad, I get to learn that. As a kid, he's gonna learn it. Okay? But in all of that, we're gonna go home from here. We're gonna get up tomorrow. We're gonna do it again. We're gonna keep on going. because that's what we do. I would love to go home, lock him in his room, and say, you're gonna until you're better. That's not the reality. We don't do that. We just keep going, and we live this life with a sense of adventure. Imagine what your lives would be like if you committed to doing that. So again, I say, I want you to do those 3 things. Eventually, we'll learn those things together. But today, when you walk through those doors to leave here, I want you to have committed or not to the adventure. Now, if you commit to the adventure, it's going to be fun, it's going to be scary, and it's going to be worthwhile. It's going to be all those things. It's going to be uncertain. We're walking into uncharted territory. But if you don't commit to the adventure, then you're going to just be here while everything else is moving. The thing we like to do is we like to dig in our heels and say, if I just stand here with holding my breath long enough, it's not going to change. And then the next thing you know, you're just like, wait up, guys. Because it's gone anyway, right? That's what will happen if you don't commit to the adventure. The adventure is going to happen with or without you. The cool thing to do, though, would be to get in the car and go on the drive. Get in the car and just go. You're going to take some wrong turns. Some things will fail, but some of them won't. And it's always the ones that don't fail that are ones that are really meaningful. Yeah, if things fail, we'll learn from them, but only to help us with the thing that didn't. So, commit to the adventure, whatever that is. Whatever it is inside of you that is anxious-ridden, that is kind of scared about that. If it's the church, if it's your kids, if it's your education, if it's your job, whatever, your spiritual growth, all of that stuff, commit to taking that next step, the adventure. I'm going to say it again. Commit to taking the adventure. Let us pray. God, I thank you for the opportunity to reflect personally on the adventure that you have allowed me to be a part of. And I thank you for every opportunity. I pray for this congregation. I pray for anyone who is struggling with anything right now. I know it's scary. I know it's hard. But if you commit to the adventure, Lord, fill our spirits. Put your spirit in our heart and stir within us a love for the unknown, a love for the adventure. I pray that everyone in this room can take the next step with confidence, knowing that you do not let your faithful people fail. Not permanently. And that for every failure that we do have, we become stronger for having learned something new. Stir within us the courage and the strength to say yes to the adventure. I pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Go ahead and stand up with us as we sing this last song, Control. It seems like an appropriate song. If you know it, sing it, because I need some extra voices up here now.
Here I am, all my intentions, all my obsessions, I want to lay them all down in your hands. Only your love is vital. Though I'm not entitled, still you call me your child. God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me.
Here we go. I've had plans shattered and broken, things I have hoped in fall through my hands, but you have plans to redeem and restore me. You're behind and before me. Oh, help me believe. God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me, but somehow that frees me to take my hands off of my life and the way it should go. Oh, God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me, but somehow that frees me to open my hands up and give you control. You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me. You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me. God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me. Somehow that frees me to take my hands off of my life and the way it should go. Oh, God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me. Somehow that frees me to open my hands up and give you control. I give you control. I give you control. I want to give you control. You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me. If you'd like to be a part of our final blessing, please raise your hand to the Lord. As you go from this place today, make a decision. Commit to the adventure or not. But I know, I believe it to be true, that if you commit to the adventure, you'll never regret it. God bless you. We'll see you next week. You want me? You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me. You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me. God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me, but somehow that frees me to take my hands off of my life and the way it should go. Oh, God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me, but somehow that frees me to open my hands up and give you control. I give you control. I give you control. I want to give you control. You want me, somehow you want me. The King of Heaven wants me. So this world has lost its grip on me.